Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. It's another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Donnie D'Amato. That's the first time I've done that intro that I've been having in my head for a while now. I'll get it down, I promise, because we are still working on making sure that this is a good show somehow, some way. But I guess a couple of things to note in terms of improvements that I'm trying to make on the studio, just to start off with. The first thing is that I found out what was wrong with the intro camera. For whatever reason, I don't know what's going on. As soon as I go live, the camera cuts out. I don't know what that's all about. There's something going on there. So it's really just a plug out, plug back in kind of thing that corrected that camera. Now I also have it in my preview so I can see it actually happen over here. Which is cool, I guess, as well. So I'm keeping tabs on that. Also, I have a lot more light on the doll now, which is really great. I would totally cut to the doll now to show you, but another thing went wrong, and unfortunately the pedal that I used to switch to that camera no longer has any power. It needs 9-volt batteries. I don't have any that have power. They all have died over time, so I literally just ordered a pack of them to get back on track. And you know what? That's something that happens in a studio all the time, where the batteries just go and you need new ones, and it's something that, you know, you need to keep up on. I'm also noticing that it went green again over here, but guess what? You didn't see that. I did, so I can go ahead and unplug and replug it in, and hopefully we'll get that camera going. I have a couple of other things to try out to hopefully get this camera working in some way on a regular basis. But anyway, more problems that I need to solve over time. But because I'm not able to transfer it over to the doll today, I'm not going to be talking with the doll. We're just going to actually talk about the topic for today. And the topic for today is going to be about sort ordering, or sort order, okay? And this is obviously going to be very riveting. It's going to be very exciting. Maybe not, I don't know. This is a very niche thing, but it came up actually in my LinkedIn feed as a bit of research that a team was doing. And I thought it was very interesting because when I saw it, I had an immediate jerk reaction about the expectations for what this whole thing is going to be about. But then I actually asked my wife, who, if you don't know, is also a design system designer, and she had a different take on what the expectations were there. So I will be showing maybe a graphic later on about how to envision what we're talking about. But for the viewers that are listening and not actually watching, this is actually going to be okay for you, because what I want you to do is I want you to visualize a list. And if it helps, you could visualize a table, okay? Because the pattern that we're going to be talking about is very table specific. It happens a lot in tables, because tables have a lot of data in them, and very commonly we like to arrange that table into different ways such that it makes it easy for us to understand what the table is trying to give us as data, right? So in that table, you're going to have lots of different rows of data, right? So they're just going all the way down. And some of the controls that you might see is you might see some filters to reduce the amount of items that are in that list. That happens all the time. But another thing that you might see in there is sorting the list, right? So sorting the list, you typically will have some sort of button that will sort the list, okay? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to envision what that button looks like, okay? Maybe it's an icon, maybe there's text in there, very verbose, right? But envision what the icon or the text or whatever inside of the button looks like, okay? And if there's multiple buttons, envision what those buttons look like, okay? Because maybe there's a button that does one thing, and there's a button that does another thing, okay? And again, we're talking about the order of the items that are in that table, right? So we would expect that when you hit this button, that it's going to order the items in the table one way, and then maybe there's a different button that orders those things in the reverse order, okay? Now, I'm being very ambiguous in terms of what it actually does because I don't want to necessarily suggest that one thing or another thing is happening, but I'm going to start using those terms now. And again, I don't want you to necessarily be biased by what I'm about to say, but again, I want you to envision you're hitting a button. It's going to arrange those items in one particular ordering, and then you hit another button and it kind of does like the reverse. Or maybe even just that one button can toggle between the one way and the other way, right? And you could see, you know, maybe the content and the icon change when you hit that button. Maybe that's how it works. So that's okay. I think either one of those things is fine. But now what I want to talk about very specifically, again, is what does that information in the button convey? What is it doing, right? What are you conveying to the user in that button, right? And I thought, again, this was a very interesting idea. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about alphabetical. All right. So alphabetical order would be going from like you know, an A to Z order from, you know, English or Latin alphabet. And if I was to hit the button and something would happen to the list, it's entirely possible that the first result would start with an A at the top of the list, and then maybe the last result will start with a Z or something of that nature. Maybe it's a B or C on top, or, you know, X, Y on the bottom. But most people know what alphabetical order is, right? Then maybe you hit the button again, or it's a different button or whatever, that reverses that order, right? And it goes and says, okay, now the Z's and the Y's and the X's are on top, and then the A's and B's are on the bottom, okay? Now, what is that first ordering? What would you call that first ordering, right? From A at the top going to Z at the bottom. Is that ascending order or descending order? Or is it something else? Is it alphabetical order? Or is it reverse alphabetical order? I mean, I think that's probably more verbose, certainly. But, okay, let's take the alphabet off for a moment. And let's say that they were actually numbers. Maybe they're prices or something like that, right? And let's say that it starts, maybe the first price is 0, right? So it's 0. And then maybe it goes all the way up to $1 million, right? So the first price that's there, maybe it's a cent, maybe we'll start with a cent, right? Maybe it's at the top of the list, and then maybe the $1 million is at the bottom, right? And then you hit a button and it reverses, okay? Well, in that particular case, it would seem that ascending would say it's more money, right? It's a higher amount, so you're ascending in terms of larger amounts, right? So that's an ascending that I think could make some sense. I mean, it's entirely possible that, you know, I think the idea here is also like number line related, right? Because if you look at like the x-axis typically, or any particular axis, I guess, you can go from even negative numbers to positive numbers. And if you look at that as a y-axis, that is going up, right? So even if you start at some negative number and you go all the way up, that going up there is ascending, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense when you're talking about numbers, where you're ascending and going, okay, you're starting at, you know, 0 or even negative numbers, and they're going up, right? The numbers are going up. When it comes to the alphabet, what's going up? Does it make sense for the alphabet to go up? Like when you're going up, is that going from A to Z? If you think about this on an axis, right? Is A at 0 or 1 and Z at 25 or 26, depending on, you know, indexing, of course. Is that how it's supposed to work? Because the other thing that I think is really important here is that when we're talking about ascending and descending, typically, you know, we could think about it outside of the context of a table and say, oh, yes, of course, the numbers, they go up and they go down. But the thing that's, I think, a little bit weird about this is that, sure, if we talk about the numbers and we say, okay, they're ascending and they're going from 0 to 100 or 1,000,000 or whatever, and the numbers are going up, the real interesting thing about that is in the table, even if the numbers are going up, the items typically are going down, right? So like if we're talking about, again, the first item on there being, a penny, right? And then the numbers are going to go up. Well, the items are going to be listed as they go down. So what is ascending at that point, right? Because ascending is just, it's saying that the numbers are ascending, but the items, they're descending, right? They're going down. As you go for larger and larger numbers, you're actually moving down and further down and down the page, right? So in a way, it's like counterintuitive in terms of what we're talking about when it says ascending and descending, because, okay, the numbers are ascending and descending, that's easy, but the items that are in the table, they're not ascending and descending in the same way. They're being listed as the ascent goes up, you're being listed going down. So it could be really confusing, and especially in the case of, an icon that might represent this, right? And that was the thing that this post is talking about, which I'll share in a moment. This post was specifically talking about how there's a few different ways of potentially conveying this idea of ascending and descending, either with letters or numbers, and how that might be conveyed as an icon specifically, all right? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to show on the screen over here. Let's see here. Let's go to my screen. Let's go to the post. Here we go. So here's the post. It's by Vlad Kazaku, I think that's correct. And apparently he's co-founder CEO at Flowly. He was speaking with Giovanni, I guess on the team there, and talking about representing ascending and descending, okay? Now, I'm going to go down to the whiteboard here that they have a post of. I'm going to make this nice and big. Let's see here. Is it going to open up for me? There it goes. So yeah, so there's 4 different ways of showing the possibility of ascending and descending. And you could even see, like, it's almost like in a table view where you have this first column, which has this arrow that points down, and then the second column has an arrow that points down, third column has an arrow points up, fourth column has an arrow points up. And the difference between those columns is the first column starts at A or 0 at the top and goes down to Z at the bottom or 1 at the bottom. The second one, which still has an arrow that goes down, starts at Z at the top and then A at the bottom. And same with the numbers, 1 at the top, 0 at the bottom. And then again, 3 and 4, the arrows go up, but the third one has the A at the top, Z at the bottom, and then the fourth one has Z at the top, A at the bottom, right? So there's a couple of different combinations that are happening here. And again, the question kind of comes out and says, okay, what are the expectations here? So from my perspective, right, after really thinking about this and saying that the idea of ascending and descending could very much be a little bit ambiguous in terms of what ascending means and what descending means. And what I think makes more sense, which maybe is a little bit odd, I think 1 and 2 make sense to me. And the reason why I say 1 and 2 make sense to me is because the arrow is, in my mind, related to the UI that we're working with, okay? So the UI that we're working with here has a list of items that is going down, right? As you add another item to the list, it'll be at the bottom, right? So as you are looking at the list, you're looking at it from top to bottom. That now makes sense to me that the arrow is always going down, right? These are the items, and they're all going to be going in this direction. That means that the first idea of having, okay, A is at the top and then Z is at the bottom, that conveys the first thing, where A is at the top and then Z is at the bottom. Then if you were to reverse it, right, so you would have the inverse of this, well, now Z is at the top and A is at the bottom, but you're still reading it all downward, right? You're not going to start at the bottom and then start reading up, because most likely the controls aren't at the bottom of the screen, they're at the top. So now, again, thinking about this, I think 1 and 2, which are, again, the arrows are both pointing down in those cases. It's just that the A and the Z are flipped depending on what the order is, okay? And I think that makes sense to me from, again, a UI perspective, right? It's entirely possible that people think of it differently, where what's supposed to happen is not that the A and the Z should flip, but the arrow should flip, okay? And I think that can make some sense, especially since what we typically do talk about, especially from an accessibility point of view, is we actually do have a sort direction for accessibility purposes. Let me actually find the ARIA sort. ARIA sort. Here we go. So ARIA sort has some values that are expected for it. Let's go ahead and show you these off right here. So here are the values for ARIA sort, which is, again, an accessibility attribute that you can put onto something to identify the order in which these results are in. And as you can see, there is two values. One of them is ascending, or a couple of values, it'll be clear. One of those is ascending, another one is descending, okay? But I guess, again, the problem is that what does that actually mean? Now, I guess one of the things that you could think about here, too, is that if I wasn't looking at this necessarily with my eyes, visually, right? And if some kind of assistive technology is meant to convey what this order is meant to show, right? Well, I guess then in that case, if we're going to start at A and go up, saying that, you know, again, from 1 to 26, if we're going to start at A and go up, right? Because I guess that's up to 26. Then we're ascending, right? Because it's A to Z, and Z is ascending, I think. I don't know. It's really actually kind of hard. I feel like we need to do some more research on this, because I can imagine that there's a lot of different possibilities here. It's totally possible that, like, you know, the end is at the bottom, right? Some people can visualize the possibility of the end being, okay, here's it at the bottom, you know? It's also entirely possible, I think, that a person could get used to a particular, I guess, expression of this, right? Where on this particular site, A does mean, you know, the bottom, while on this site, maybe Z means the bottom. And especially if you have a toggle kind of sorting where it just flips anyway, I think a single click that denotes that now this order that you used to have before now is the reverse order of whatever that is. Another thing that might be helpful here too is that, you know, there is another one called other as a value here, maybe actually explaining that it's alphabetical or reverse alphabetical would be more clear, right? Because again, ascending and descending when it comes to the alphabet, I'm not sure if it's entirely one-to-one, right? Because I don't think we necessarily think about ascending and descending when it comes to letters at all. I can't think of any analogs off the top of my head that does that. So I think there's a lot to be gleaned out of this a little bit, is that it's entirely possible that, you know, lots of different ways of showing the sort is different. So something to consider, I think, overall. I think it's a really interesting idea to think about. But yeah, I mean, you know what? Let me know what you think. That's what I need you to do. I need you to let me know what you think about sort orders out there and what the icons are supposed to be. And, you know, maybe some examples would be cool if you could go ahead and find those out there in the real world. I don't even know. I'm sure I could pull up Excel icons and stuff. You know what? Let's do that. Let's pull up an Excel icon for sort and see what that actually looks like. Because I'm curious now that I'm thinking about it. Let's see. Excel. Here we go. Okay. Let's go to images so we can see all the possibilities here. I'm going to go ahead and pop this open. All right, so interesting. So they actually, yeah, you see this here? This is exactly what I was recommending, right? And actually it's over here too, right? This one here, right? So the arrow going down is always going down, but it's the order in which the letters are flipped, right? Yeah, it's always going down. It looks like that's what Excel is doing. And that's one of the first places that I can remember talking about sorting. But let me see here. I'm going to see actually just sort icon in general. And yeah, there's a lot of different ones. I mean, look here. You can see this one here, the Shutterstock one. Yeah, look at this. Here, I'll open this bigger. So you can see here that in this particular case, it's always A to Z, right? No matter what, or 0 to 9, right? It's always that way, but the arrow changes. Very interesting, right? Meanwhile, this icon set, the arrow stays the same, right? And like I said, I think the arrow staying the same is the key here, because that's a UI piece, right? Especially, again, you know, from a accessibility standpoint, the screen reader might not necessarily actually identify, you know, up and down or anything like that, ascending, descending. So I think there's something to be said about that, about, again, you know, the taking this from a screen reader point of view and saying, what is it going to convey, right? I think conveying the idea of this is alphabetical order versus this is reverse alphabetical order is a lot clearer than whatever these icons are trying to do typically, right? I think that's the case. But again, let me know what you think. I'm wildly interested to know what you folks think about this while I try to get this camera to work. Try to get the two-shot to work again. Not that it matters. You know, we're not talking to the Dell today, but we'll see what happens here. Anyway, like I said, thanks for joining me today. I was really appreciating you listening to my banter about this kind of stuff. Oh, actually, you know what? Before I cut this off, more things that I have to remember to do, because there's things that are happening this week. I do know that Ben Callahan has the question this week. He has a new one. So go ahead and check that out. Just search for Ben Callahan, the question on the internet, if you haven't figured out where that is at the point. I'm sure if you're watching this, you probably know about Ben Callahan. But I'm just going to make it quick so I don't have to fumble around with the computer to find it. Eventually, I will have a pre-production that sets all this stuff up. I used to have it when I was upstairs and made it easier. But anyway, we have that stuff that's going on. Additionally, a reminder that there's conferences coming up, right? So Smashing is going to be early October here in New York. I think actually Friedberg is even earlier than that, maybe next month. And then Converge in Brighton, which I'll be at, which I'm very excited to be at. And then I have some news, but I'm not allowed to share that news yet. But what I want you to do is I want you to keep that conference schedule open. Keep those funds ready. There's something coming. I can't say much more than that, but I'm very excited about it. So make sure you have a little bit extra funds for the end of this year. There's something very exciting that's in the works that, again, I'm not going to be able to say anything more about that. But anyway, now I'll end it here. All right, so thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, whenever the heck that is, at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Yes, anyway, so long.